It's
I
a
agree.
survival thing.
Yeah, I think, but that's
Literally.
I think that's a great point Killer makes. I mean, a lot of us work this out far too late in our lives or career development. It would certainly, from my own perspective, that would have been great to be on track with that earlier.
When you do that, I don't know, and you'll have to tell us.
Personally, the whole period was just,
for Christ's sake, and then it all comes out. I mean, what was that moment like for you guys? Because I know we've been there a couple of times. It's really, really hard.
for me,
Camilla manages, once again, to make everything entirely about herself. What should have been an acknowledgement of a supposedly shared experience becomes a self-pitying monologue, drenched in exaggeration and selective memory. She claims she was incredibly lonely, while Chris was protected, with people around him in Pennyhill Park, while she had no one. But this is a highly stylized version of events designed to evoke sympathy. There is little to no public evidence that paparazzi were doorstepping her, or that there were any meaningful media, frenzy around their relationship. It's also laughable to suggest that becoming a classical singer doesn't come with some level of media aspiration. She says herself that she started singing 3 or 4 years before meeting Chris, yet her record deal with Gary Barlow flopped, and she later pivoted to trying to become a pop singer, something she now derides in a tone that reeks of bitterness. That attempt didn't work either. So to now act as though she was some unwilling victim of fame, when she actively chased it and failed at every commercial attempt to gain traction, is just disingenuous. The loneliness she speaks of wasn't caused by media pressure. It was the fallout of realising she doesn't have what it takes to succeed in the industry she so desperately wants to belong to. And using this platform to reframe her failed career ventures and amplify a narrative of martyrdom is not only manipulative, it's transparent.
Personally, the whole period was just incredibly lonely. He was so protected in Pennyhill Park, you know, and they had sort of media people and everyone sort of like looking after them. And I kind of had no one, you know, so you'd have like paparazzi outside your house and you'd have journalists doorstepping you, and it had never been like that for us, you know, like, so, I mean, I started singing, 3 or 4 years before we met. And, you know, when you become a classical singer and a rugby player, you just don't expect that. And it's not what you want, you know. If you wanted that level of attention, you know, you'd try and be a pop star or something. So I found the first half of it, like, really exciting. And I was so proud. Like, I can't even explain to you how proud I was. But I've personally found it really, really lonely. And then the second half of it, or the last part of it, because, and you'll know this really well, no one wants them to win more than they do. Like, no one does. And I think maybe what the general public don't see is they are killing themselves to get there. They are killing themselves. Like, the amount of birthdays and weddings and family outings, and for the other players, child's first steps and things, births, you know, that they're missing so that they can be the best player they can be. And then, you know, like the bounce of a ball, or like a gust of wind, or, you know, one of the players is really sick, and then it's just...
This section is not only emotionally manipulative, it's deeply calculated. Camilla is recycling the exact words, tone and phrasing she used when monologuing to me the night I was raped. No one wants them to win more than they do. She said that to me unprompted in a bizarre stream of consciousness attempt to justify her resentment of Chris's career while simultaneously seeking sympathy for herself. Now she's using it again, almost verbatim, as if she's delivering some profound insight, when in reality it's a narcissistic, attention-seeking performance. Then comes the repeated phrase, killing themselves to get there. She hammers it in with the same rehearsed tone, and it's clearly a barbed message directed at me. It reeks of resentment. It's a dig at the hard work I put into Vin-X, where I trained multiple staff, exceeded targets, and gave more than was asked of me, all without any proper remuneration or recognition. She's using this as an opportunity to minimise and mock that effort, as if to say, your work meant nothing, you're not special, we all suffer. But make no mistake, she's not empathising, she's goading. It's nasty, deliberate, and cruel. Worse still, this speech is deeply disrespectful to the actual rugby players she claims to be defending. Many of them love the game. They know the trade-offs and they've chosen that life. To frame them as slaves killing themselves strips them of agency and dignity. It reduces their achievements to collateral damage in her self-victimhood narrative. This is not advocacy. This is performance, and every word of it is weaponized.
Like, it's just all over, and all those people who were like cheering for you and celebrating you, they just turn, and it became so ugly. Like, and like I was saying earlier, like I am a bit of a hothead, and like some awful, like obese middle-aged man behind me was like, oh, if I was on the pitch, Jaunty, I'd be doing this and I'd be doing that. And he was sat behind me at every game. He must have had his own seat or something. Every game it was someone even more posh that he was with, like Bunty.
She despises everyone who doesn't immediately roll out the red carpet for her and immediately hand her a check for existing. Trust me, because regrettably, I've been in her presence.
Every game he would say these ridiculous things about these boys who had pushed their bodies to the absolute limit to be the best they could be. And he was like, no, absolutely not. What are you doing? And in the end, at the last game, I can't remember what he said. He said something awful about Farrell, which was completely untrue. He said something awful. He was slagging off all the boys. And then he said, it's Robshaw's last game. If I was on the pitch. And I just turned around and I was like, Jaunty, I'm going to stop you right there. If you're on the pitch, you'd be dead. Wouldn't you? Couldn't keep up with them, could you? No. Zip, zip. And then I think Richard Wigglesworth's wife was like, okay, we're going now. Bye. Sorry, Jaunty. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you're better at keeping it in than I am, but it's the only time I've ever broken. Ever.
Not true. You have always been broken.
But yeah, it was horrendous. Look, the fallout of it, and it's whether there's proud moments. I always say the World Cup is the highest and lowest point of my international career. Yeah. Was leading the guys out of the home World Cup, and then of course losing the press conferences. And
I can't even look at the pictures from that time. Like I can't. If I ever Google him and a picture of his face at that press, I can't physically. My heart just.
And all that kind of stuff. But Camilla was great as well, and she organised literally the following weekend. Again, I was in a very dark way, as I'm sure you've been, Ben, in tough times, and I was pretty dead behind the eyes. And Camilla arranged for me and my best friends to go to a house in the New Forest, turn our phones off, no TVs, and we ate and drank until we couldn't remember. And you know what? It might not have been the most sensible thing, but it was quite a nice release, even if it was just for a weekend, and it definitely helped. And it's weird. Like, I'm sure you guys have been there. When you're in these moments where you feel everyone's looking at you.
Everyone was looking at you.
You feel like you.
What Chris says here feels like a thinly veiled reference to the verbal assault I endured from Peter Shakeshaft, an incident that left me shaken, isolated and unheard. The language he uses, everyone was looking at you, you feel like you're in a fog, eerily mirrors how I described that moment at the time, disorienting, humiliating and deeply violating. This isn't a vague coincidence. It feels like a deliberate, coded nod to that experience, not to acknowledge it, but to reframe it as his own, stripping it of its context and trauma, and delivering it with a cold detachment that borders on theatrical. Then, almost immediately, he pivots to talking about playing Wales, as though the point of referencing that fog wasn't to explore any real vulnerability, but to stage a symbolic performance that both distances himself from accountability and reasserts control over the narrative. It's a tactic to appropriate language from a moment of extreme distress, reposition it in his own voice, and overwrite my reality with his version. It's not only disingenuous, it's cruel. It reinforces the sense of collusion and calculated emotional manipulation I've been forced to witness repeatedly from both Chris and Camilla. The repeated use of the word fog by Chris is not accidental or abstract. It is chillingly deliberate. Fog is how many victims describe the experience of being drugged, disoriented, mentally blurred, physically detached, unable to process what's happening in real time. Chris knows that's what's happened to me. Camilla knows too. For him to invoke that word in a tone meant to suggest personal vulnerability is a calculated act. It's not just a metaphor, it's a veiled reference to my trauma. By describing himself as being in a fog, He is appropriating the language of my experience and repurposing it as his own, while carefully maintaining plausible deniability. It's a sinister way of acknowledging what they did without ever having to admit it, and lets him wear my pain like a borrowed costume, just long enough to feign depth, then cast it off and talk about playing Wales.
This fog, and it's hard to explain to people who haven't been. You feel like you're in a fog, and just over time, this fog just gradually clears. And obviously, this can take a long time. And for that, it took a significant time to really get through. And there were some moments throughout the year, and then we played Wales in the Six Nations. First game back at Twickenham, I was playing. Obviously, one of the teams who knocked us out, and I was doing a lap of honour, and we had just won the game, and I just broke down in tears. I had to get in the change room. I didn't want people to see me. Didn't want the public to see me. I didn't want to show that side, all that kind of stuff. And all the players just kind of kept coming up to me and being like, "We didn't realise how much it affected you." But that's because it was on me. I didn't share enough, and it took a huge strain on our relationship, my friends, ourselves. And yeah, it was a really, really tough time for sure.
Then he came back and won the Grand Slam.
It is really tricky. Yeah, exactly. It is really tricky, that, isn't it? Because you kind of, this build up of pressure, like there's just this constant build. And then at some point it just bursts, and it either bursts in a really positive way because something amazing happens and everyone's excited and, everyone's celebrating, or it goes the other way and there's this huge period of consolation and sort of hunkering down and getting through it. But then you're right, it definitely has this sort of impact on your relationship as well. Because at some point, I don't know if you're like this, Camilla, but I absolutely do my best to sort of be supportive of Ben. And then there will be a moment where I just go bang myself. And I'm like, right, come on. We got to get out of this. We've got to snap out, or we've got to move on, and we've got to find a positive somewhere and get to that next place. Because otherwise it just is it's like this oppressive dark cloud, isn't it? I'm a really positive person and I've never been an introvert. I've always let everything out. So I have to teach myself. I'm learning better, I think, every time. But hopefully next time we'll win this bloody cup and I won't have to worry about it again. But it is just this build of pressure. You know exactly when it's going to happen in a campaign and when you've sort of got to be really supportive, and also then when you've got to be honest.
Just to try and flatline.
I know.
That's
you're so good at flatline.
Right?
He's so good at consistency. You know that bit about
I said that's the trick. I didn't say I was good at it.
No,
that's
you are
what
good at it. You're good at even it. You're good at the, pardon the pun, even keel. You are, though. You manage to keep it really, really level and even. And I do think that's a total trick amongst elite, all of you super athletes. And Camilla, I include you in that because I agree with you. What you do is that version of athleticism.
Her actions here just shown once again that she is not. She is painfully immature and desperate for validation, vacuous and entirely hollow.
Just being able to sort of maintain this consistency across everything, it's a very, very special skill.
The only things she has made consistency in is her bitterness, her alcoholism and cocaine addiction.
I actually banned him from sulking. So,
this section is a perfect example of how Camilla uses his life, career and emotional responses as a launching pad to make herself the centre of the narrative, and it's incredibly manipulative. She starts by pretending to set boundaries for Chris, as if she's protecting herself from his sulking. But what she's really doing is framing herself as the emotional authority in the relationship, the person who gets to decide how much pain or disappointment someone else is allowed to feel. It's a subtle way of minimising his emotional world while elevating hers. Then, without missing a beat, she pivots completely. I don't pout if I miss a note, not that I would ever miss a note. It's faux humility immediately followed by self-congratulation. The implication is that she handles setbacks with grace and stoicism, unlike others, unlike me. This is her MO. She performs maturity while undermining people who are genuinely suffering. Her long-winded lament about being a musician living in a constant state of sort of sadness is both performative and tone-deaf. She frames artistic rejection as if it's comparable to what I went through, as if missing a part in a musical is the same as being drugged and raped and then gaslit and managed out of a company that covered it up. Vin-X. She is hijacking my trauma and trying to paint herself as the quietly suffering heroine. But let's be clear, this isn't empathy, it's parasitic. She absorbs my experiences, strips them of context, and repurposes them to fuel her own image. And in doing so, she continues to violate me, not just as a person, but as a voice she refuses to let speak. What I also find galling is that she criticises him for reviewing his work, something she has clearly never done.
Say he lost on a Saturday, he was allowed to be cross about it Saturday night. And like, he always watches his game backs and goes, every time something goes wrong, I go, and I would just like let him watch and I'd just be reading my book. I'm like, all right. But then by Sunday morning, he had to be not over it, but he had to be not ruining my life anymore. Like, because initially I just sort of like let him get away with it and he'd be like sulky until like Wednesday. And I'd be like, well, my life is shit now. Like, I mean, I don't pout if I miss a note. Not that I would ever miss a note. But, you know, I don't know. I'm very good at not making my stuff your stuff. Like if I, like, you know, if you audition for a role that you're perfect for, that you've been given before and all that kind of thing. And I think because with music, you sort of get crushed like on a weekly basis, brutal things happen. Like,
she's competing with me, evident from how she kept interrogating me about handling rejection in telesales. When I simply said, we face rejection daily, it's just part of the job, she acted as if this was something trivial or embarrassing. It was a clear attempt to undermine my professionalism and paint my work as less valid or impressive.
You don't get the job of your dreams, or, you know, especially during COVID, everything gets cancelled and all your friends are like losing their houses.
She mentions COVID here. Her performance at St Pancras Station while pregnant with her second child felt like a deliberate attempt to provoke and goad me. This wasn't about honouring COVID victims. It mirrored a private, light-hearted conversation I had with her about the station's links to Derby, where I'm from. Around the same time, she made pointed comments about motherhood, clearly trying to frame me as a woman in her 30s grieving the absence of children. That's simply not true. I've never expressed sadness or loss over not having children. It's not something I define myself by. But Camilla tried to weaponise this idea as if it were a weakness, projecting it onto me to fit a false and damaging narrative.
I just think to be a musician is to live in a constant state of sort of sadness and exhilaration.
World is more like that, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's actually really interesting what Ben was saying about the even keel, because for example, when the English National Opera jobs came through, so I'm with him for Peter Grimes, which is in September and October, Handmaid's Tale, which is in January, and Magic Flute, which is in February and March.
February, March, sniff, 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 glug, glug, glug.
And when that came in, obviously I've been working towards it for a really long time, and I've given up a lot of my crossover work to train. When that came in, everyone's like, yay! Like, so.
This whole spiel from Camilla is about big jobs. This whole spiel from Camilla about big jobs and big juicy corporate gigs is lifted directly from her questioning me about winning business and hitting sales targets. When I said I never get excited about deals or wins, I just do my job and try to stay measured, because getting hyped up only leads to bigger disappointment if a client cancels, she ignored that. Instead, she pretends she herself lands these big juicy corporate gigs, only to then mock the very clients who pay her, calling them drunk people and implying it's just easy money for nothing. It's a thinly veiled way of dismissing my professionalism while painting herself as some kind of glamorous insider, which she is not.
Excited for me. And I mean, even you. And whenever a big job comes in, like whenever I get the NFL again, or, you know, like I get a big juicy corporate, you know, where you're just singing for drunk people and it's just loads of cash for basically nothing. You know, whenever that sort of thing comes in, people are always like, yeah. And I'm just like, no, I can't give too much of my emotions away, because I don't want the really low lows. I don't want the really high highs. But I think also, and maybe slightly different from you guys, I also have to like hold the energy I have for the characters I play. Like, for example, in Peter Grimes, oh God, it's not good. Just imagine the smallest minded, vilest people you can imagine. And that's sort of the character that I'm playing.
She's right there. You are talentless, Camilla. You have no real acting ability. You got the job after relentlessly dropping your husband's name, pushing and elbowing your way through to take another woman's place, who would have been far more deserving of any role you covet, on or off stage, just like you did with me. The directors and casting agents clearly didn't want to challenge you too much, nor have any of those directors or casting agents invited you back to work with them again. Not just because you're talentless, but because you're entirely unprofessional as well.
But I sort of have to save a bit of my emotion for them. But also, now that we have a child, I can't save it all. You know, it's not.
This section is also a direct lift from a conversation where Camilla was interrogating me about my acting training. I gave her small surface-level responses because her questions felt invasive, and I mentioned the importance of composure, how as an actor you have to conserve energy for the role, both in rehearsal and performance. I was using that to reinforce a broader point, the value of staying measured, both in life and in work. She took that, reworded it slightly, and regurgitated it later as if it were her own insight, once again proving she doesn't have anything original to say unless she's pulling it from someone else.
Like, you can't go method if you're on stage every night, because I'd be a handmaid, a fishwife, and an evil queen. So
It wouldn't be that
And a
fun.
bad
yeah,
mother.
it wouldn't be fun. Yeah. Oh,
He can't even bring himself to disagree with her, which is telling in itself. The evil queen line is another one of Camilla's loaded references, this time deliberately mocking my position at Vin-X, where I was systematically stripped of power by the directors she was colluding with. It's delivered with the same smug performative tone she uses when she's trying to cover cruelty with humour. The way she says, "just imagine the smallest minded, vilest people you can imagine," is chilling, because I truly believe she's referring to me, someone she saw as a threat, someone she worked behind the scenes to undermine. The fact she immediately moves on to talking about motherhood is also strategic. She's trying to project superiority, implied balance and moral high ground, while undermining women who don't have children or aren't performing femininity the way she is. The terrible mother aside is a smokescreen. She knows exactly what she's doing. It's an effort to disguise abuse as self-awareness, all while making fun of me and the trauma she and her husband helped orchestrate. She had control, I didn't, and now she's reenacting that dynamic in public under the guise of performance. She is no queen, but she is certainly evil.
she's a terrible mother. Terrible mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard work, isn't it? You're right. That's a massive
3 kids by 3 different men, just as an aside.
multi-juggle. A massive multi-juggle. Mental toughness. That is something that you both must have in spades, I imagine. Are you able to sort of compartmentalize stuff?
You have to.
I think, yeah, like you said, you have to. And people always say to me, if you were to give a kid advice now, or your younger self, what would you give them, or what would you tell to them? I think it's resilient.
This isn't just eerily familiar, it is my own words. What Chris says here is a near verbatim reflection of what I said the night I was raped, when both he and Camilla were pressing me about what it takes to succeed in sales. I told him that in any profession, whether it's sales, sport, or anything else, resilience is one of the most important traits. I explained that we face rejection daily, constant knockbacks, and you have to keep going. That resilience is learned by going through hard things and getting back up. Chris is now repeating that exact sentiment as though it's some profound personal insight. It's not. It was mine. It came from me during a traumatic night in which I was bullied and later drugged and raped, and both he and Camilla were involved in the events surrounding that trauma. To see him now echoing my words after everything that happened, without a shred of acknowledgement, while sitting next to the woman who filmed the assault, is both violating and surreal. It's not just theft, it's gaslighting. He's not just co-opting my ideas, he's presenting them as if he's this wise, grounded one, while I was systematically stripped of power, credibility and protection in that very environment. This is how abuse hides in plain sight, not just through violence or cruelty, but through the rewriting of memory, the performance of insight, and the silencing of the original voice.
Yeah.
I think any walk of life, any career, any sport, if you want to go far, you need to be resilient, because there's not many people who go to the top and then just stay there. Most people are on the roller coaster and are up and down, and they have good years, bad years, all that kind of stuff. And it's just learning from it all the time, I think. And I think, unfortunately, it's just going through stuff and getting back up. But also it's having the good people around you. I think you need to do a lot yourself, but you can't do it all yourself. You need people giving you a hand, whether it be your partners at home, to your teammates, to your friends, all that kind of stuff. You need that support, but I think you still need to be the one willing to get yourself back up the ground and basically start again and self-motivate.
Right after parroting my own words about resilience, which I originally said the night I was raped under their questioning, Chris adds, I think you still need to be the one willing to get yourself back up off the ground and basically start again. Let's be clear, this isn't just banal advice, it's gaslighting, thinly veiled as encouragement and a direct minimisation of my reality. It implies I somehow haven't gotten back up, that I didn't show enough grit or resilience, that I need to do more, prove more, be stronger, when in fact I already did all of that repeatedly in an environment he has never experienced, will never understand, and had no part in building. Chris Robshaw has no authority, none, to comment on what it takes to survive emotionally, psychologically or professionally in that workplace, especially when that workplace actively covered up abuse and protected perpetrators. For him to speak in these motivational platitudes next to the woman who filmed me being raped is not just offensive, it's a calculated reframe. It's the performance of insight by a man who has enabled harm, remained complicit in silence, and now wants to pretend he's the one who understands resilience. He doesn't. He understands complicity, and now he's trying to repackage it as wisdom.
Right again.
I think you need people behind you to sort of slightly catch you if you fall and then sort of give you a little push forward, but it has to be all you. Like, I was trying to describe my parents to someone the other day because he would love to start a family, but he was worried.
At this point in the recording, Camilla starts describing a fictional male singer, someone who, in her words, would love to start a family but was worried he didn't have much money. She claims she told him she grew up without a pot to piss in and that her parents couldn't help her get into music college but gave her a fantastic foundation of self-belief. This is a thinly veiled, self-congratulatory rewrite of a conversation she had with me the night I was raped. At the beginning of that evening, she was pressing me about having children. I said I didn't want any, and she responded, completely unprompted, with that exact phrase. My parents didn't have a pot to piss in, and they just got on with it. I responded neutrally and professionally, I don't want to do that, meaning I didn't want to bring a child into poverty. I wasn't judging her or anyone else, I was simply establishing a boundary and making it clear I didn't want to continue the conversation, which she knew was intrusive. Her face visibly changed when I said it. She looked offended, but I had every right to give a measured personal answer. She ignored it, she kept pressing. I added, under pressure, that I'm not a fan of the education system in this country, and that if I ever did have children, I'd want to be able to afford to send them to private school or a Steiner school, which I couldn't do on my current income, because I wasn't being paid fairly. She also knew I was recently single, and not in a position to just drop everything and have a baby. Again, I said this simply to close off a line of questioning that was inappropriate, not because that's actually what my decisions hinge on. She knew this, and she was deliberately attempting to make me feel uncomfortable. But she stored this conversation and is now regurgitating it on a public platform to frame me as weak, as a weak, naive version of herself, as if I simply didn't work hard enough, as if my struggles were the result of some internal failing, rather than the systemic inequality and deliberate sabotage by people like her and the directors at Vin-X. She also attempts to cast herself as a martyr for the arts and her family, someone who grew up poor but made it through grit and heart. But the truth is, she hasn't brought her own 2 sons into poverty. She's managed to live in one of the most expensive areas of Surrey and has had the benefit of enormous privilege and connections by using her husband's name. And worth noting, her first child, Sophia, was left with the biological father's parents, likely because she didn't want to raise a child in poverty herself. So for her to perform this faux humble speech while exploiting and reframing my own words and her faulty, distorted perception of my situation, knowing full well I lost my home after working underpaid at Vin-X, is pure cruelty disguised as motivational storytelling. She is speaking about me, to me, and against me all at once.
That he didn't have much money and that he was privately educated, he's a singer too, but he was worried that he couldn't send his kids to private school and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, listen, I grew up without a pot to piss in. Like, there were times where we couldn't afford food, but what I did have, they weren't educated, they couldn't help me get to music college, didn't even know music college existed, which is why I've gone this circuitous route. But what they did...
Notice how she looks down, looks up, blinks excessively. She doesn't even believe her own story.
Did do is they were so invested in me, like, emotionally, and they were so genuinely interested in the things that I was interested in. Like, me going to them and saying that I wanted to sing classical music would be like Wilding coming to us and saying that he wanted to play professional chess. We know...
That line isn't random or original. It's a pointed reference to a conversation she had with me the night I was raped. Earlier that evening, she'd asked me, out of the blue, what I'd watched on TV recently. I casually mentioned The Queen's Gambit and said even though I had no real interest in chess, I thought it was a brilliant show. Her reuse of this reference isn't accidental. It's part of a wider pattern of emotional theft, taking fragments of my lived experience and inserting them into her own narrative to either mock me or assert control. Every detail she delivers here is calculated, from the male singer friend who can't afford private school, to not having a pot to piss in, to chess, to the theme of resilience. She is deliberately mirroring, twisting and re-owning the exact words and boundaries I shared with her in good faith during a highly vulnerable time.
Nothing about it, nothing. But at the same time, we would do absolutely everything that we could to enable him to achieve his dreams. And also, I think the best thing my parents gave me...
No one asked. No one asked!
...was a fantastic foundation of self-belief and self-esteem.
A fantastic foundation to become a psychopath, coupled with so little self-esteem and self-awareness, all you do is trash other people and attempt to intimidate them and steal from them. Your parents are shit, Camilla. Stop attacking mine for what they gave me. F you, you jealous, cruel puta.
And, you know, because of their financial situation, I just saw them time and time again sort of try and then fail and then try and then fail. And, you know...
Well, they were irresponsible then, and it's abundantly clear you were parentified, Camilla, which is one of the reasons you are undoubtedly a narcissist and a profoundly dangerous psychopath.
When I was growing up, they each had 2 jobs, and by the time I was sort of in my pre-teens, teens, they were both studying as well. I would like to say my mother now has a doctorate.
No, she doesn't. This is a direct reframe of a monologue she gave me the night I was raped. She was boasting about her mother allegedly having a PhD in psychology and presented it as some sort of inspirational legacy. I remember being surprised because her personality, shallow, performative, attention-seeking, didn't align with someone raised closely by a mother with a doctorate in psychology. I responded neutrally. That's quite a commitment. 4 years of study while you were doing your GCSEs. I was trying to politely mask my disbelief, since she had also implied her mother pursued this doctorate while Camilla was a child. She quickly corrected me and said it was 1 year, which made no sense. Doctorates, as anyone academically literate knows, are not completed in a single year. Later, I looked up her mother's credentials out of curiosity and found the truth. Her mother had done a postgraduate course in psychology, not a doctorate. That's a significant distinction, and this wasn't a slip of the tongue. This is Camilla intentionally misrepresenting her background to inflate her story and draw comparisons between her own supposed resilience and achievement and her mother's fictitious rise from ridicule to doctorate holder. Her mother, Deborah Kerslake, even gives herself the title PhD on her own website, which is galling and a total misrepresentation of her level of ability and academic experience. She does not hold a PhD. She did a postgraduate course. It seems that Camilla is from a family of liars. Her phrasing, "people would have laughed at her," is a transparent projection. The truth is, Camilla would be the one trying to laugh at others, especially those she secretly envies or seeks to undermine. This story was never about her mother. It was about making me feel small, poor, less educated and unworthy, just as she and the Vin-X directors work to do systematically.
And my dad now works at IT, so they
Wow.
I think seeing them achieve, I mean, things that would have been unheard of. I mean, people would have laughed at them when they, you know, my mum said, "Oh, I want to have a doctorate in psychology." People would have laughed at her when I was sort of 5 or 6. They were like, "No, you're a single mother. You live in a council house."
In the same segment where Camilla falsely claims her mother now has a doctorate, she briefly mentions her father works in IT, downplaying what is a normal profession. This mirrors a conversation on the night I was raped, when she said he worked at a big firm. I asked which one. She said, Accenture. I responded neutrally saying, "Oh, I know Accenture," and explained I'd worked for a commercial fit-out company that handles some of their small works projects. She immediately looked threatened and asked, "How do you know of them?" as though my familiarity with a company she had name-dropped challenged the status dynamic she was trying to control. Rather than engaging, she became defensive. It was clear she was uncomfortable with me demonstrating professional experience or confidence. This was typical of her behaviour that night. She needed to feel superior, and any attempt I made to connect or respond with equal footing was shut down or subtly punished. It was a constant undercurrent of control, performative self-elevation, and power play, all of which fed into the wider collusion and psychological undermining I experienced from her and the Vin-X directors. Also to note, her mother was never a single mother.
What you're talking about. You know, my dad made pies, and if someone was to say, oh, you know, you're going to end up really high up doing IT, can't say too much, but, you know,
He's not really high up. He's a drone.
very high up doing IT in a big business. I don't think anyone would have believed him, but I think seeing that and seeing what they could achieve definitely gave me. There was never a point where I thought, oh, I can't do this. I was just like, of course I'm going to do this.
Camilla's statement, never a point where I thought I can't do this, directly echoes my own words from the night she was pressuring me to recount my CV and falsely praising my move to London. She was trying to put words in my mouth, but I clearly said there was never a point where I doubted myself. Her repetition of this phrase feels like an attempt to appropriate my experiences and mindset, positioning herself as more confident and self-assured than she truly is.
Like, look what they've done. And they were always just sort of gently behind me. They never pushed me, never, quite the opposite. But if I ever was like, oh, this is really difficult, they'd just sort of gently be there to give me a push.
Give you a nudge, yeah.
And I would like to think that's how I was with you. I mean, Chris never needed pushing, but he almost needed the opposite. He needed sort of stopping and sort of turning around and like cuddling.
This feels awkward and out of place, but not for her.
You know, not to emasculate your darling. But, you know, I think behind every great man, there is a great woman, probably.
You are both despicable.
But it's interesting because it also affects how you raise Wilding as well, because everything that you bring to the party from what you've experienced before, it, you know, affects those decisions and the things, the approach you take. Chris, from your perspective, you lost your dad, didn't you, super early on? I think you were just 5. So has that changed how you see things, how you want to raise Wilding? Is that the sort of decisions that you make around being a parent and being a father?
Yeah, it has. It makes me probably more sad and probably think about it a little bit more now. Obviously, it's been 30 odd years or since it happened, so obviously a lot has passed. But yeah, you want to be there, and look, I'm in a fortunate position now.
Chris has never held a conventional job outside of rugby. He mostly attends what are essentially social, romanticised wine tastings with Jamie Shakeshaft, fully paid for by companies that gain little real value from his presence. He rides on his name and, crucially, on the hard work I have done to help build and raise the Vin-X brand he later co-opted, while drawing a hefty salary of £50,000 per year plus commission, despite contributing minimal tangible value. That's why he has so much time on his hands, because he's not required to do anything other than show up for the odd social event in industries he has no experience in.
Well, I can kind of work a couple of days in a week and spend a bit more at home and be around for more weekends than if I was playing and stuff like that. So we actually have his first rugby tot session on the weekend of the World Cup. So
Chris wanted me to take him. He wanted me to take him. I was like, can you imagine the heartbreak?
Yeah, no one wants to see you anywhere.
The heartbreak of the dads who've taken their kids to rugby tots. There's a Robshaw there, and then it's me. I'm the one that turns up. Absolutely not. That's not happening.
I think that would be ace.
It's not happening.
He's under a bit of pressure for a 2-year-old, isn't he?
Well, exactly. Yeah, start him young. But I'm not worried. If he wants to play rugby, I would like him to do some sort of sports, because I'm very sporty. I'm not the most academic. I was very dyslexic. So I want to be kind of outside playing with him and stuff like that. So I do hope he goes down that kind of route. But I think it's like anything. If he wants to do something fully, I'll support it. Like Camilla said, the chess example. If he wants to do something fully, I'll give him all the support he can, if I can give him some knowledge. But look, I'm probably not going to be out there forcing him to do speed drills and down ups and burpees, and if he's late on his homework or something like that, because I want him to aspire to be a rugby player. And look, I'm sure you're the same. You want your kids to experience more than you. And look, rugby's been amazing for me. I've travelled the world, and we kind of met through rugby, and given me an amazing life. And amazing experiences and all that kind of stuff. And you always want more for your kids, though, don't you? You want them to go off and be their own people.
But it has to come from them, you know, like you can't, those kids that are just helicoptered and, you know, to within an inch of their life, like piano, tennis, Mandarin, you know, they get to university, no one's forcing them to do anything anymore. And then they just like loaf around and smoke weed.
Are you going to...
Notice how they cut that straight away. Jealous, bitter and calculated. She's clearly still obsessed with dragging me down. Jealous I had hobbies outside of school. Jealous my parents actually invested in me. And that comment brings up the bullying from Joe, accusing me of smoking weed the same evening she filmed me being raped by him. That's not a coincidence, it's sick. She's trying to tear me down to feel superior, but it's obvious she can't compete. My former classical training while I was still at school is just a painful reminder to her. She doesn't have what it takes. She doesn't belong. She spent her entire adult life chasing a dream that was never going to materialise in the way she imagined, and now she's scrambling for scraps. She can't stand that I'm everything she wishes she was, and she'll twist anything so she can bring me down. Pathetic, petty, obsessed.
Stay away from rugby, or are you going to dive back into it in any meaningful way, like as in coaching or management? Is that not your bag, or is it something you might look at later?
Not really. I didn't really want to go down the coaching route. I do a little bit of presenting with, the commentary stuff with the TV work. But in terms of coaching, no, I didn't have that drive to do it. And I think a lot of people, unless you really love the sport, a lot of people, I think, sometimes go into coaching because they're unsure what to do. And it's almost like a safe net. Of course, there are other people when you could see them a mile away and you said, you're going to be an amazing coach. You know so much detail and all that stuff.
But in yet another transparent money grab, Chris Robshaw took up a coaching role at a local girls' school in Surrey. Not because he's committed to youth development or coaching, but because he needs to maintain the illusion of purpose, authority and income. Let's be clear, I do not believe that Chris Robshaw, Camilla Kerslake or anyone affiliated with the events surrounding my rape, including those at Vin-X who enabled and protected them, should have any access whatsoever to children, not their own and certainly not other people's.
But for me, I didn't have that burning desire, and I had sacrificed, and not only I had sacrificed, Camilla had to sacrifice, and my family, of missing weddings and birthdays, and as I'm sure you guys have as well. And I didn't want to do that for not playing the game. I'd always wanted to play rugby. I hadn't always wanted to coach. So I think when that unfortunately came to that time, I was happy to step away. And look, I'm sure once, and if Wilding does start playing rugby, I'm sure a lot of Sunday mornings I'm going to be there and being roped into coaching, and which won't be ideal. But I'll do a couple of tricks, I'm sure.
I sort of hope he doesn't play rugby. I just don't see how he could ever live up to it. You know?
You don't see a Roy Kent moment coming up then?
You know what?
Get sucked back in.
That's presuming that you've watched Ted Lasso.
I have seen Ted Lasso. You know what? I really want to be an extra in a film. You know what? For some reason, I just think it'd be really cool to be in like a battle scene, just somewhere like, I don't know, having a sword fight in the background. I just think that'd be an amazing experience.
What, like wearing a helmet so no one knows it's you, or actually making sure everyone does know it's you?
Yeah, just something like that. Yeah, I don't need any lines. I could just be, in the back, sword fight, shooting a gun, something like that.
He's just seen that show Extras, and he thinks it's all like it's all Daniel Radcliffe talking about condoms and like. But I don't think it is. I think those people work quite hard.
It's hours of sitting on set doing nothing.
Yeah.
But like, I had notes on this because this is eerily similar to, completely echoes a conversation I had with them that night. But I'm missing a page, so I'll have to go back to that later.
Wearing like full plate armor. Yeah.
I just want to ask both of you, because it's a performance podcast, I just want to ask both of you for a performance hack that makes it easier to get through every single day. So Camilla, perhaps let's start with you. Like, what would you say is the thing that can most help someone get through a day with better performance?
This whole section is deeply unsettling because it's almost word for word what I said to Camilla during 2 separate conversations where she was questioning me about performance, particularly whether I ever experienced stage fright. I told her no, and she seemed oddly offended, like my answer disrupted a narrative she was trying to construct. I explained that with choir and solo performances, especially with Voices Derby Girls Choir, we were always really well prepared. The environments were supportive, and I genuinely enjoyed being on stage. The only time I felt real nerves was just before performing in front of peers, because I knew they were really listening. That exact phrasing, "your peers really listening," is now in her mouth, presented as though it's her own lived experience, which it is not. She's not just mimicking what I said, she's repurposing my life and language as part of her own public identity. It genuinely feels like she was mentally taking notes throughout our conversations, not to grow or connect, but to mine me for material. And the line about her cheeks shaking, that came after I admitted I couldn't relate, because I've never had that physical reaction to nerves. She clearly took it personally, like my calmness threatened her. She even echoed something I'd said elsewhere in response to her constant pressing of me, that it doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you can find some joy in the moment. A reflection I shared during a conversation about finding fulfillment in high-pressured sales environments, even if it feels lacking in creativity. Environments I have extensive experience in, unlike the Kerslake Robshaws, and I dare say the Shake Shafts and associated individuals. This too has now been recycled by her as though it's original insight. And when she talks about feeling an honour and a privilege to do what I do, that's almost exactly what I said when she was dismissing my sales career and commitment to my clients. When she was rubbishing and downplaying my role and me during conversation, I said, no, it's an honour and a privilege and a pleasure to serve my clients. She is copying me word for word, jealous, conniving, thieving. It's bizarre and insidious. She isn't just copying, she's performing me. She's performing her faulty perception of me and using it for clout. And the more I see it, the more calculated I know it is.
I think remembering why you're doing it, I get asked a lot about stage fright, a lot about stage fright, because, and it's not just, singing to 2,000 people or 17 million people. It's almost more scary getting up in rehearsal and having to sing in front of your peers, because they're all really listening and really judging you. But so whenever I get really, 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 really nervous, I just stop and relax and remember what a joy it is to do what I do, and what an honor it is, and what a privilege, and sort of, I feel as soon as that happens, like my breathing slows, I can release my diaphragm better. I
spoke to her extensively about breathwork, and she's poorly copying what I have learned from experiences she never had.
To get this thing, if you watch my early TV performances where I was so nervous, I'd like smile and my cheeks would shake.
Because you were never meant to be there. You were never meant to take up space on those stages because you hadn't done the work. I've seen those videos, and it's obvious you were stamping on people who had actually trained for 5 minutes of fame where you added no value and never will.
And I found that was a really good way, just reveling in it and just living for the joy of what you were doing. And, if you're doing something awful, like you've been practicing the same passage for like an hour and a half and you're just like, ugh, just stop and listen to the music that's happening, and then you're like, joy. So yeah, finding joy in all the little bits for me.
Yes, very good. For my
Chris says, very good. I am known in my personal and professional life for using that phrase once someone else has finished their contribution to a conversation, usually when it is noteworthy. They heard me say it multiple times the evening they met me, with colleagues, many of whom I had trained, as a brief way to praise them for their contribution. Chris can't even help from stealing from my phrasing. You both need to get your own personalities and stop stealing from mine.
Myself,
And Chris?
when it came to weekends and games, I was very much about preparation. In the week, if I had prepared and gone through stuff, I was confident. Whereas if I'd been injured and maybe not trained,
I was the one talking about preparation, how it's key to success, while Chris just sat there watching Camilla grill me for info they'd later turn into their own content. Now Chris is going on about preparation in this interview like it's some big thing, and Camilla's taking it just as personally as she did the night she later filmed me being raped. The truth is, she's never prepared, and she's bitter because all her efforts have only led to professional humiliation. They're straight up stealing from me, my words, my experiences, trying to make it their own.
Or done enough, or being a bit slack with my stuff. I was always very nervous in my abilities, but I thought if I had prepared well, I was confident and knew what I was going into. And then, as Camilla said there, I always say, when you got to Saturday, especially with international games, you got to play in the best stadiums in the world against the best teams in the world. And for 100 minutes, you got to do what you always dreamt about doing. Whereas before that, you were stressed, you were nervy, you were worried about preparation and tactics. After that, you're doing recovery, you seeing sponsors, you've got TV cameras in your face, and then you're worried about the next week. But just for that 100-minute window, you got to do what you always dreamt about doing, always loved, and what every young aspiring rugby player wanted to do. So yeah, it's obviously easy sitting here saying enjoy the moment, because I definitely didn't enjoy it as much in the moment. As everyone always says, when you retire, enjoy it. But there's so much pressure, there's so much tension. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. But yeah, for me, it was all about kind of preparing well in the week.
Do you enjoy it more now in your memory than you did at the time?
I think I do. In all honesty, because I was actually saying to Camilla, like, I don't miss rugby. I miss the occasion. I miss it.
Because all you want is status and fame, and you will do anything to maintain or gain it, including covering up a woman being raped at a work conference, your wife filming it, and trafficking drugs to maintain your lifestyle after rugby. You and your wife are the literal definition of selling one's soul.
Big occasion and running out of Twickenham, and you see on social media where the World Cup's coming up and all the talk about it, and there's so much hype about it, and it's brilliant. And then Camilla was like, before the last one, and everyone, you are so nervy and tense and stressed.
He was a dick.
But
He was a dick.
because you're so pressured, and you, like you said, you're working so hard. Yeah, and you are, because you don't want to mess up. You want to be at your best. But now, like you said, in hindsight, you think, oh, I really enjoyed it, because you're happy in your memory. And I don't know if you're similar, but yeah, I definitely do feel that way now.
No,
Oh, yeah.
I
Rose-
agree.
I have more interviews and their entire Instagram profiles seemingly dedicated to re-traumatizing me and deliberately goading me since early 2023. Unlike them, I actually work. I have real clients who depend on me and a life full of responsibilities. I deeply resent having to spend time putting this all together in the first place. Vin-X, or the directors at Vin-X I should say, deemed these people worthy of official and unofficial positions within the company, and they've used these interviews and their influence to try and push me out of the business, aiming to reduce me to poverty. This isn't just personal, it's a calculated attempt to silence and erase me. I would like to express that the preparation and filming of this, along with the daily bullying via Instagram stories and the like for 2.5 years now, is an unwelcome distraction to me healing and carrying on with my life and supporting myself, which is something I genuinely need and want to do. I work hard and they have stopped me from working and living to even a basic standard. I'm disgusted by all of them. I do not deserve to be treated like this. These people deserve nothing. I want peace. They refuse to give it to me. To those of you who support me, thank you. Your belief in truth means everything. I encourage you to share this widely across all platforms, in private messages, emails, texts, and conversations. Every voice matters in exposing what has happened. I've included relevant names, addresses, and email addresses in the description below for anyone who wishes to express concern or hold these individuals accountable for their roles in the harm done to me. Let me be clear, I'm speaking out because the justice system has failed me. I'm living in exile while those who hurt me continue on with public careers and family lives unchecked and unchallenged. That imbalance is not just painful, it's dangerous, especially for the children they have unfettered access to. Not only their own children, who I believe are at risk, but also to the young girls rape apologist and co-conspirator Chris Robshaw has access to at his coaching role at Hazelwood School. I will not be silenced. I will not be erased. This is not about revenge. It's about accountability, justice, and safety, especially for others who may be at risk. A message to my perpetrators: I am still here and I'm not going anywhere. I deserve justice and I deserve to be paid for what you made me lose.